Well, Gary, it's been about 6 weeks, I think, since Australia locked down in response to the COVID-19 outbreaks, which had been declared a public health emergency of international concern by the WHO on the 30th of January, it was, and characterised as a pandemic on the 11th of March. So what impact, Gary, has the virus and the response to it had on Pharmaxis's operations and its current products and also its products in the pipeline?
So I suppose the initial thought when we first realized that there was going to be having to work from home and social distancing, our first thought was for the patients in Europe, the US, Russia, and some parts of Asia that are currently taking products that are manufactured in our factory at French's Forest. So, clearly the first thing was how do we protect the workers there to ensure that they can carry on with the production? And then, was the ongoing impact of the changes in airlines and the lack of airplanes flying anywhere from that point onwards going to impact our ability to actually get the product to the countries where it was needed by those patients. So that was really our first thought, and the first contingency plans we put up were to increase the kind of resilience of our production team and make sure that we could maintain our supply to patients.
So that's a good thing, and you've been able to do that effectively. You feel?
Yeah. So we split our. So we normally work one shift. We increased the workforce slightly with some contract staff, and then we split the team into two shifts so that if somebody did get sick in one of the teams and we had to remove all of them from the workplace, then the other team could continue. So in that way, we increased our output and also increased the resilience of the team to do that. And to be honest, the distribution and getting it to the markets has been problematic because there's far less flights going to Europe and to the US. But we've been working with our partners, distribution partners, on this, and thus far we've managed to deliver all of our stock on time and in the right quantities. So yeah, I'm pretty pleased with how we've addressed the issue so far. And then the rest of the office, other than some of the lab workers, are working from home again to try and protect the workers that are in the production and quality areas.
That's good. And you said that you've been classified as an essential service, so you can carry on.
Yeah. And so obviously supplying medicines is obviously an essential service, and particularly for those patients who are taking it. So we have been able to carry on, but it presents its daily challenges just in the unknowns. But we've thus far overcome them quite well, I think.
Okay, and you also, I noticed you only very recently announced a successful early milestone for your drug to treat a rare bone cancer, a myelofibrosis. Is that what it's called? And
yes.
So this really has been able to carry on throughout all of this.
So I guess it's an interesting case study. I mean, we finished the phase 1 study in Australia, so that's in healthy volunteers, and we finished that before the impact of the coronavirus was felt. So that hasn't slowed down at all. We've had discussions with the FDA about preparing for ourselves for the investigational new drug, or the IND submission to the FDA, which we would expect to make around mid-year. And we've been able to complete all of the toxicity studies. So we completed 6-month toxicity studies. So those things together mean that we can take that drug into cancer patients and start doing a proper efficacy and safety study in patients. And we can run them for 6 months. So it's enough time to get a really good readout on whether the drug works or not. But then the question becomes is when can you start the study? Because clearly a lot of the hospitals are struggling. Patients don't want to go into hospital. So I know that globally it's had a big impact on studies, the start dates and slowdowns. So we've been working with a global contract research organization, or a CRO. We have managed to identify sites which are still open for business and where we believe we can start our study. And we think in Q4 of this year we'll be able to start. So we're quite confident that we've got a kind of a plan A and a contingency in place that would allow us to start that next study in myelofibrosis in Q4. It'll be a relatively small number of patients, so it's not a big study. So hopefully that will mean, and it's an area of high unmet need, so the patients there really need additional treatments. So yeah, we've got a lot of enthusiasm from the clinical opinion leaders that we've talked to, that they think the mechanism of our drug is likely to be effective in this area, and it certainly adds on to what they're currently using. So there's enthusiasm on that side. Hopefully, with clearance from the regulators around mid-year, we should be all set to go before the end of the year. So that's an exciting step forward for us as a company, as we're looking to retain an asset like that systemic LOX inhibitor and take it through to clinical proof of concept and really add some value to it.
Okay, so could you tell me a bit more about that? You said there's a great unmet need. So is yours one of the only few medicines to address this?
Yes, it's a pretty thin pipeline in this. So myelofibrosis is a kind of bone cancer. So it's where scar tissue or fibrotic tissue overcomes all the normal bone marrow that you have in the center of your bones. And the bone marrow is responsible for the production of your blood cells, so red cells, white cells, and platelets as well. So if the bone marrow is replaced by fibrotic or scar tissue, then the body can't produce the number of cells, blood cells that it needs to. So the result of that is reduction in red cells, so you get anemia, which can lead to fatigue, tiredness, loss of breath, shortness of breath, a reduction in white cells, which can make you more prone to infection, and a reduction in platelets as well, which has additional adverse effects on the patient. So the body tries to respond to that, and the spleen starts to produce more blood cells, and that in itself causes an enlarged spleen, which causes its own problems. So the current treatments deal with the symptoms of myelofibrosis. They're called JAK inhibitors as a class. There's 2 of them on the market now. And whilst they treat the symptoms of the disease, they don't do anything about the actual bone marrow and the fibrosis is there. Our drug is an anti-fibrotic, so it inhibits a whole family of enzymes called lysyl oxidase enzymes, which cause cross-linking in collagen fibers, or the actual cause the network of fibers, which is the scar tissue itself. So if you can block those enzymes, you can stop the collagen fibers knitting themselves together, linking together, and you can reverse the fibrotic process. So we're hoping that by doing that, we can stop the ongoing scarring and fibrosis of the bone marrow. We can improve the amount of healthy bone marrow that's there, and therefore improve the blood counts. And that will work probably on its own, but also will work in tandem with the other drugs that are available at the moment. And there are very few good antifibrotics in the clinic at the moment. So ours is one of only a couple that are really progressing into this stage. So I think that's why there's some real interest in the drug, because it's tackling this problem from a different and unique angle, and we're the only drug that's tackling this particular set of enzymes. So yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, I assume this is a sort of a global health issue. It's not confined to any particular area, so there would be places around the world that would be interested in testing the product, wouldn't there?
Yes, it is a rare disease, so it's about from a population sense, primary myelofibrosis affects about 1 in every 500,000 people. So there are about 5,000 patients diagnosed each year in the US, and about 16,000 patients at any one time who have it. And the life expectancy is about 5 years. So yes, it's rare, but it doesn't matter where you live. You can, it does happen, and it happens to people normally in the ages of kind of between 50. It can happen at any age, but normally between the age of onset is between 50 and 80 years of age.
It's good to hear that it's moving ahead. It does sort of lead to another question, related to the COVID crisis. Whether this crisis will fundamentally affect how you do your business, for instance, in the longer term, and for instance, how and where and how you conduct your trials, and with whom you collaborate, and how you supply your product. So, what do you think?
I think that the impact on clinical research is likely to be reasonably long-lasting. I think that certainly there's going to be a hiatus while all the healthcare systems get back to normal again, and probably an impact on patients. There's also willingness to join in with clinical studies. So I think there's a potential negative there. On the positive side, though, I think that never before has there been such an opportunity for the global pharmaceutical industry to showcase itself and what it can do in the way of research and development of new drugs. And I think we've already seen, the response to COVID-19 and the number of sheer volume of programs that have been started, the amount of resources and money that's being plowed into this is now, normally this is hidden, and I think this is very visible. So I think the whole research process and the way that companies go about developing their drugs will be maybe appreciated more than it has been before from a research perspective, and hopefully we'll see more engagement, and maybe there'll be an upside to this. I don't think it all needs to be gloom and doom. I think from the sort of everything else, the production and supply, I think things will get back to normal. I hope very, very quickly, and certainly with the return of the travel industry and the planes and whatever. I think the infrastructure globally is also now seen to be a bit fragile, and I'm sure that steps will be taken in the aftermath of this to make sure that everything, and from a supply point of view, becomes more robust in the future. So, yeah, in the short term, I think has some definite negatives, but I hope that even in the medium term, we'll be learning from what's going on now, and things will be improving. And heaven forbid there's another one of these pandemics later on, but when that maybe does come around, we'll be much better place to cope with it than we are now.
Yes, that would be good. And you said yourself that you have taken steps to make sure that your supply chains can keep up with it. So this would have informed your future action, I expect, as well.
Yes, certainly. We're certainly taking note of the people that are able to help us at this particular time, and those that haven't been able to. And it certainly builds up a list of trusted partners who you can work with that can help you sustain your business as we go through this period.
That's good to hear. And just one last question: two of the products that you do have on the market at the moment, Bronchitol that you mentioned, and Aragol, and clearly respiratory diseases are one of your fields. So, is there any relationship or anything that these products could possibly do or be adapted to help with the COVID lung issues?
Yeah, I think that we're starting to get a clearer idea now of the aftermath of the infection with COVID-19, and there are beginning to be, I think, more reliable reports of the level of lung fibrosis that's happening with some patients, particularly those that have been on a ventilator. And we do have Bronchitol, which is a drug which helps clear mucus from lungs patients with cystic fibrosis, but it also has been shown to work in some subgroups in bronchiectatic patients as well, which also have problems with their lungs. So there may be a place for these drugs later on, I think, in managing maybe the longer term effects of the infection. Perhaps more closer to home even than that is that we have two products which are anti-fibrotic in their own right. The LOX product, which I just talked about, going into bone cancer, and also a drug which is highly specific for Loxel-2, which is one of that subfamily of that, which is specifically upregulated in the lungs of patients with pulmonary fibrosis. So I think, as we learn more about the disease and the particular subgroups of patients and the problems they have, there's certainly a potential there for us to trial some of our drugs in those areas. I hesitate to throw ourselves into the mix at the moment. I think what's needed at the moment are antivirals and things to deal with the acute stages of the disease. But as the picture becomes clearer about what the clinical aftermath and the issues that are being faced by patients are, there may be some opportunities there for us to join in with the global initiative to try and bring help to these patients. So, but yeah, we'll wait and see and see how the clinical picture emerges in the next couple of months.